All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We've got Super Bowl champion, first ballot NFL Hall of Famer, 11-time Pro Bowler, member of the NFL's all-time team, and arguably one of the greatest defensive backs to ever play the game, Mr. Rod Woodson. Rod, how's everything going?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time. So, wild world we've been living in. How have you been managing? What you been doing to kind of kill time?
Well, I mean, it's I work for Westwood One, which I call the national radio broadcast of
Cool.
NFL games. So that happened after the pandemic started in February. Right now I've just been spending time with the family.
Cool.
Building our bond again. I haven't really got to see my kids that much. Just moved to Las Vegas.
Oh, cool.
So got to see this city a little bit differently. My daughter works for one of the major casinos, Caesars.
Oh, cool.
So it's been an interesting take of just spending time with the family, building our bond back again, kind of like when they were kids and they were out of school for summertime. Just trying to build that relationship back up.
That's awesome. How hot is it out there today? Because it's like 100 in Baltimore.
It's about 105 here.
Whew.
But Baltimore has humidity.
Yeah.
And here I think we have probably 17% humidity
That's
today.
not too bad. Yeah.
So it's not bad.
Like you throw on a sweater, you'd be all right.
It's a dry heat.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about your early on career. So how did you end up at Purdue?
Well, I mean, I got offered quite a few scholarships. I knew I wanted to play in the Big Ten. I wanted to stay close to home. So I took 4 official visits in the Big Ten. Purdue was one of them, obviously. I went to Arizona State outside of the Big Ten. But Purdue was really the only college that I went to as a recruit that said, if you sign with Purdue, you're going to play as a freshman.
Oh, cool.
Michigan didn't say anything. Wisconsin, Ohio State, even Arizona State, they all were like, maybe you might not. You really don't know. And it really was a good choice for me. I love Purdue. It's a great engineering school. It's really a great academic school. Unfortunately, we weren't great when I was there in my time frame. We did have that one winning year in '84. We went to the Peach Bowl. We were ranked for a little while. We have a little pride that we beat Ohio State and Michigan and Notre Dame all in the same year. Purdue's never done that before, so I was on that team. But
Oh, cool.
I wanted to stay close to home.
That's awesome. I have a question because you brought up engineering. I saw that. Is it true you studied electrical engineering early on, or that was kind of what enticed you?
No. So I was intrigued about getting into the engineering school, which is a lot harder than I imagined. Didn't make it into the engineering school, so I went into the management school.
Oh, cool.
I don't think there's been athletic scholarship given out to an individual, and they went through the engineering school at Purdue.
Interesting.
It's extremely tough to do,
Yeah.
Let alone being partaking in some type of sport and activity, then going into the terminals all day long at Purdue. So it's pretty tough.
At what point during your college career did the NFL become like a real reality for you?
I would probably my junior year, people started talking to me. Even when I was at Purdue, I played well. I ran track my whole life.
Yeah.
I ran track at Purdue. I was a Big Ten indoor champ 4 years in a row. So, but the like, a little faster each year. And then they started talking to me. I have a couple friends. They started talking to me my junior year, saying, people are really looking at you. They think that you can be after your senior year. So it was later in my career when I first got to Purdue. My first couple of years, I don't think anybody really noticed me. But my last 2 years, I think I started getting a little. I was on the radar of different teams.
Oh, cool. And so, what was your draft process like? Did you have a good idea you're going to be a first round pick, or how did that come into play?
Well, so in '87 was the first year they held the combine in Apple. So I didn't know what the combine was. I ran down there. I drove my car up to the combine. It was a 2-day process, not like it is today where it's a 6-day process. And then when you thinking about, if you're going to be a high pick or not, they say everybody was telling me I was going to be a top 5 pick, but I slid to 10. And fortunately enough for me, I did slip to 10
Yeah.
because I went to a great organization in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chuck Noll was still there. Donnie Shell was still there. Stallworth was still there. Mike Webster was still there.
That's wild.
So I got to play with some of those, iconic players for the Steelers past.
That's awesome. I was actually talking to Donnie Shell a couple weeks ago. I interviewed him about just kind of about his whole career and just how excited he finally was to get the call from the Hall of Fame. He said he was speechless, and his wife was shocked. She said he never stops talking. So that's kind of funny. But it was awesome. It was awesome chatting with him. So Pittsburgh, was Pittsburgh one of your top choices, or were you surprised to get that call from them?
Well, I'm not a type of person that is going to pick and choose what team I want to go to as a rookie. I was honored just to be thought about. I really, leading up to the point, I never really spoken to the Steelers. So Tony Dungy was defensive coordinator and the defensive back coach. Tony never really talked to me. They thought I was going to be off the board. When I stayed on the board, I thought I was going to be a New Orleans Saint because they had the number 11 pick.
Okay.
And they called me at the beginning of the draft saying, if nobody takes you, we are taking you at 11. And even the Steelers didn't even indicate to me until the 10th round or that the 10th pick came up in the draft cycle. And then they finally called me and said, do you want to be a Steeler?
Oh,
I'm
cool.
like, absolutely.
Hey, that's awesome. And then, so how soon after that did they say we want you to come to Pittsburgh?
Well, I was there the next day.
Oh, really?
So the next day, my agent and I flew out over there in a small plane. I'll never fly in a small plane again. But we flew in a small plane. We got out there through rivers. My idea of what Pittsburgh was going to look like was completely different. I thought it was going to be smoggy and dirty because of the steel mills. But there was only one steel mill still in existence at the time in Pittsburgh. It was a gorgeous city. Thinking that I was going to be there day one when the season started, when training camp started, and I wasn't. I held out. I ran in the European track circuit that year. I didn't sign my contract until October 28th of that year, so I only played about 7 games.
Was there any wow, there's a lot of history with this team, I gotta live up to that? Was there anything like that in your mind, or just kind of getting ready for it?
No, there's a culture.
Yeah.
When I first got there, after I signed, I got there. Probably a week later, Mel Blount walks into the locker room, and I thought I was a big corner, but Mel Blount is way bigger than me. But just the history, first of all, the culture that the Rooneys built from the top down, the culture that Chuck Noll implemented into the locker room, and it was a player-led locker room. So Donnie Shell and those guys, and Mean Joe Green, he was a defensive line coach at the time. So you understood the culture had to be a certain way, and you had to live up to that culture, or you wouldn't be a Steeler that long. Yeah. And it's still the same today. And, so I kind of knucklehead player, for me to go to a place like that kind of humbled me a little bit and made me think about the aspect of the game.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. And then was there much, since you kind of came in midway part of the season, was there much of an adjustment period for you, or were you relatively an easy adjustment to get on to playing?
Well, I mean, when I first got there, we had Dwayne Woodruff. He's played a long time in the National Football League. Lupe Sanchez was a really good player. They drafted Delton Hall in the 2nd round from Clemson that year. And in the 4th round, I believe they drafted Thomas Everett. He was a safety. Matter of fact, he was the first Jim Thorpe Award winner from college, because that's when they started putting those type of awards out back in 1987. So we had a young base back there, but we had a couple of veteran players. When I got in finally in late October, those guys were already settled in. So to get me on the field, they put me at safety, here and there. And that's where I got my first interception.
Oh, cool.
I was playing safety against the Cincinnati Bengals, and Boomer overthrows, I think it was Eddie Brown, and he tips it, and then the ball comes right to me, and I get a pick 6. So,
cool.
But it was a process of learning the game.
Yeah.
It wasn't an easy transition, just for the fact that the best of the best plays in the pros. A lot of fast guys in the National Football League. I thought I was fast. I thought I was going to be the fastest guy all the time on the field. And I realized I'm not going to be the fastest guy on the field all the time.
That's awesome. And then speaking of the pick six, I saw you had 12 in your career. Did you keep all the footballs?
I did not. I kept the
Ooh.
first one and the last one.
Oh, cool. Interesting. I always wondered about that kind of stuff. That's interesting. And then so kind of going into your career at the Steelers, I saw that you got hurt against Detroit, but they didn't put you on IR. Why not?
Well, we had a really good team. And fortunately enough for me, we had a player named Carnell Lake who was so talented at the defensive back, played outside linebacker at UCLA, comes into the National Football League. We turn him into the strong safety for us and our dime player. But he was such a good athlete that when I did go down, Bill Cowher came to me and I was like, Bill, I can make it back if we make the playoffs. It's 4 months, 3.5 months, 4 months, I can get back. And luckily for me, Bill listened to me. That's the first thing. Normally coaches just put you on IR and you're done. But coach did listen to me, and no other players from the defense and secondary got injured that year.
Oh, cool.
If another guy got injured, they would have to put me on IR and bring in another guy. But nobody else got injured. Carnell Lake moved the corner. He played extremely well. And I got that opportunity to play my first Super Bowl just because of that.
What percentage were you like health-wise of your best? What percentage were you playing at in that Super Bowl?
Probably 60,
wow.
65. There we go.
All right, cool. So yes, so if you had it your way, would you have stayed with Pittsburgh your whole career? I
would have. It's unfortunate that I left. The story would, they offered me a 3-year deal. I told them I asked them to give me a 5-year deal. I was there for 10 years. I was like, listen, a 5-year deal doesn't help me. It's not guaranteed anyway. Yeah. It helps you guys. Yeah. It takes my cap number down for you guys. And they were just adamant on only having a 3-year deal. I was like, if you give me a 5-year deal, I'll sign it today. But if you give me a 3-year deal, then more than likely not. And then obviously they didn't give me a 3-year deal. They called me on draft day that year. So that 98 season, that 98 draft, they called me at the beginning of the draft, said, are you going to take our deal? I'm like, I'm a little disappointed that you're going to give me 35 seconds to answer. And I hung up the phone, and that was the last time I talked to him at that point. I was a little hurt, bitter for a while, but, I got over it. They did what they thought was right. I did what I thought was right. They're a great organization. I love the Rooney family.
Cool.
I know everybody in the organization.
That's awesome.
I wish I would have stayed.
Yeah. And I have a question. So I always see that. Oh, there's a little glitch right there. All right.
Purdue, the old black, all my clothes, most part, have them black.
Yeah. That's wild. And then I have a question. So I know NFL players get like business propositions all the time. Was there like one crazy business opportunity that you were like, is this guy serious? Like some crazy idea that somebody wanted you to invest in? I've always anything like that?
No, I mean, I did a couple little, when the .coms first started, I went out there on the limb and tried to do a couple of those. Because we have Carnegie Mellon, which is a really good computer science school right there in Pittsburgh. Yeah. Those guys are from Carnegie Mellon. Unfortunately for us, it didn't work out. But that's the way it goes. Yeah. I didn't do anything too crazy. Yeah. That old saying, when it's too good to be true, it's not true.
It is.
I just believe that factor for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. I have a question. So, what led to you signing with San Francisco?
Well, San Fran, I knew they were a good team. At that point, I was really chasing the ring that year.
Yeah.
So, I had opportunity, maybe to go to Atlanta. And, I'm like Atlanta, San Francisco, Eddie DeBartolo. I knew he was a great owner. Yeah. They had a really good football team. And I went out there that year in '97. They were really, we were really good that year. Unfortunately, Jerry got hurt that year. T.O., he wasn't the T.O. we grew to know. Yeah. At that point, he was a baby still in the National Football League. Our defense was played really well. We won. We were 13-3. I mean, so we had the number 1 seed. We just couldn't beat Green Bay that year, and we lost to Green Bay in the championship game at Candlestick. And, so that's, I went out there chasing the ring, but I'm really glad I did, because I was there with Eddie D. Eddie D is a great owner. He treats everybody like family. Awesome. I was glad I was there for the year.
And I have a question. So speaking of T.O., so you played against T.O., but you matched up against a ton of great receivers. I assume, I want to say Jerry Rice is the toughest receiver you ever played against. Is that correct?
Well, I'm going to say no. Just for the fact I only played against Jerry twice.
Okay.
So that's an easy answer.
Yeah.
Right. Easy answer. Always put the Chris Carters, the guys you played and faced. I can always say that, but there's 2 players to me that I played each year, every year. And the first guy is Webster Slaughter, who for the Cleveland Browns. He was 5'10", 5'11", extremely quick. And defensive backs understand when you have a quick receiver, they cause you a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
They can create separation on their own. They can stop on a dime. I mean, they cause a lot of headaches. And he was a talker. So he talked a lot of trash. And the second guy was Andre Reed.
Really? Interesting.
Because I was normally bigger than most receivers that I played against, especially in the slot. And Andre was just as big as I was.
Yeah.
So when he came into the fold with that K gun in Buffalo,
yeah.
I had to change my strategy up a little bit how I was going to play a guy like that, because I couldn't be physical with him because he was just as physical as I was.
Yeah.
So I think those 2 guys were the guys that I think each year that gave me issues.
Interesting. I have a question. What enticed you about Baltimore that you wanted to kind of join this new kind of new squad?
Well, Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis he was our linebacker coach in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
So back in '92, Marvin came in with with Bill Cowher and that staff. So Bill Cowher, Dom Capers, Dick LeBeau, all those guys come in. So, Marvin was a rookie green coach coming from Pitt with the Steelers. He was a defense coordinator in Baltimore. So he called me up and said, listen, we got a lot of young talent.
Awesome.
We just don't know how to win yet. So we need some veterans to come over. And I went over and I knew about Ray and I knew Jonathan Ogden. I knew all the guys that were there from a distance. And then when I went there to visit, I'm like, this is the place I want to be. And Art Modell was an old school owner at the time, just the guy who treated, his players like family. All those old school owners treat their guys like family. And, I got to play for 4 different ones. The Rooneys, Eddie D. I went to, to Barlow. Modell. And then I went to Al Davis, with the Raiders. But being in Baltimore, that was a really good experience. We had a lot of young talent. And in 3 years, we got to the point where we were good enough to win a Super Bowl.
That's awesome. What was your first impression like when you meeting Ray Lewis as your teammate?
Well, Ray was a baby. I was going into my 12th year. He used to call me Grandpa. And Ray grew. Ray became arguably one of the best middle linebackers to all league. But I also think he became one of the best leaders of men in the locker room. He uses things that he went through in his life to help other guys in those same situations.
Yeah.
He's a good man. That's one of my guys. I still talk to him today all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then so going into the 2000 season, did you have the idea like we're good enough to compete with anybody?
No, heck no. If anybody said they did, they'd let lying, because it was a process. So the first year we were 6-10 under Mark Broda. The culture wasn't right there. The second year, Mark Broda leaves, resigns. We get Brian Billick. First year under Brian Billick, we go 8-8. We can see the culture changing. We needed some more changing. We needed guys to buy into the locker room. I think the biggest thing is when you find a good culture is when guys take ownership in the locker room of what the offense is and the defense is, and they make it their own. Those are the great teams. Those are the great cultures. That's how Pittsburgh has always have been. And it's been that way, way back with Chuck Noll, under Bill Cowher, and now under Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
And I saw Baltimore going in that direction. And in that third year, how we would do our own self-study on Fridays as players in Pittsburgh, I implemented that same thing in Baltimore.
Cool.
First year, it didn't go too well. Second year, a little bit better. Third year, everybody bought in.
Oh, cool.
And that's because Ray made them buy in. Because Ray was the leader. It wasn't me. Ray was the leader. He was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens, and he made all those guys buy in. And once they bought into it, you can start seeing each week in camp how good we're going to be, because we all challenge ourselves to run to the ball. We all challenge ourselves to work hard. And then you can see it week in and week out. And we had a couple of those hiccups early in the year when we gave up 36 points against Jacksonville Jaguars, but we had 5 shutouts in a year. And that was the difference maker for us. We knew that people weren't going to run the ball against us because we had Tony Siragusa and Sam Adams up front. And people were going to have a tough time throwing the ball because we had fast linebackers. And we had, I think, veteran, savvy safeties and 2 young corners in Chris McAllister and Dwayne Starks.
Interesting. That's awesome. But you guys didn't win the division, right?
We did not win the division. We were a wild card team. We had to go on the road all our games to get there.
Unbelievable. That's incredible. So I saw you guys. I wrote it down. So you guys went up again. So you guys went up. You went through Brian Greasy, McNair, and Rich Gannon, and then you found yourself in the Super Bowl. Did you guys know like this is going to be a walk in the park, or were you just taking it as any other game?
No, I mean, honestly, I know for me personally, I didn't want to play against the Minnesota Vikings.
Interesting.
I mean, they were lights out that year. You got to remember they had Randy Moss, they had Smith, the running back, they had Chris Carter. They had some players over there. They were throwing the ball down the field, taking top off the defensive. They caused a lot of defenses a lot of headaches that year. And then when the Giants beat them, we were like, what the heck? And we started watching film on the Giants, and this is no lie. After the first quarter, watching one game, we're like, they won't get past the 50 on us.
Really?
And I think they got past the 50 once or twice in the Super Bowl.
Unbelievable. Was Cunningham on that Giants team? On that Vikings team?
I can't remember if Randall was there or Culpepper. I can't remember if Culpepper was there yet.
Oh, interesting.
But they were slinging the ball down.
Yeah. Interesting. That's wild. And then so going into the Super Bowl, you guys knew you were obviously much better football team than New York. At what point during the game did you know it's over?
After the first touchdown, what they would do. So every time they would, offense would motion out versus the Giants defense. So they would always keep their corners bumped out. So Jason Sehorn was going to go against Brandon Stokely, and we knew Brandon Stokely can run. Yeah. A lot of people didn't know that, but we knew this little kid, didn't look like he could run, but that kid could fly. And we're like, if he gets matched up on Sehorn, that's a touchdown. And as soon as it happened, we're like, that's a touchdown. Once they be scored, we're like, because they're going to keep trying to run the ball against us, and they won't be able to. And we need them to put the ball in the air. And once we got that 7 points, we felt very comfortable enough that our offense can score enough, and they're not going to get down. They're not going to get down the field on us too often.
Interesting. And then speaking of the Ravens, what are your thoughts on seeing like Lamar Jackson's breakout last year?
Well, when I look at Baltimore, I always go back to Pittsburgh, because when they play each other, they're always close games. Yeah. They're always tough games, because the culture is very, very similar.
Yeah.
And they take ownership. You got to play, we always said you got to play like a Steeler.
Yeah.
Well, that's their motto. You got to play like a Raven. They have that on their sign going out on the field.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so, that's why I love both organizations, because, you have 2 really good owners. You got the Rooney still with the Steelers. You got Steve Bisciotti now with the Baltimore Ravens, and Steve Bisciotti is a great man, and he treats everybody with respect. So it trickles down to the field. And to see Lamar come out and have that breakout year was exciting. He's the definition of the X button on Madden, because what he was doing last year was, as a fan, I love to watch it. Then as a coach, in my head, I'm like, okay, what would I do to try to stop a guy like that? Obviously you got to try to make him pass the ball. I would crowd the line. I'd be in a cup front, so they can't do too much movement up front. And a cup front is just a bare front, a 0 and 2 threes, and to make him throw the football. So hopefully, if they get back to the situation this year where they get into the postseason, Lamar has a breakout postseason. Because he kind of struggled in the last two postseasons. He's young, but I think he knows he belongs. He's one of those elite quarterbacks in the National Football League, and now he has to just take his game up to the next level once the postseason starts.
Do you think defenses are going to start to figure him out, or do you think as soon as he starts adding more to his passing game, he's just going to be unstoppable?
Well, I mean, if he keeps increasing his passing efficiency the way he did in the during the regular season last year, it's going to be tough. The hard thing about it is that offense is set up for him.
Yeah.
You got to remember they scrapped that whole Joe Flacco offense, and they bought all into Lamar Jackson, what he can do and what he cannot do, and they're dealing with his strengths, and I think that's a tremendous thing on John Harbaugh and what he did with that organization. He said, we're going to go all in what this guy can do, and we're going to highlight that. So, I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I think he's going to keep getting better throwing the football down the field. They need to keep getting him weapons at the tight end position, at the receiver position. The running back position, I think, is set for a while for these guys. They got some really good players there. So, and as long as the defense keeps plugging in and keep playing the way they did. I mean, Wink did a tremendous job last year of putting a really good defense on the field every single week. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this year in the AFC North with Pittsburgh and Baltimore if we get a season.
Hopefully. Speaking of that, Are you optimistic? Like right now, these past couple of days, with all the stuff, with all the not much safety stuff going on, but assuming they get all that done, are you optimistic about this season?
Yeah, I mean that would be the easy solution to quarantine for 5 months. It's harder to do that with 53 guys compared with 15. But I think the players are starting to voice their opinion on player safety. What's going to be the protocol if somebody does test positive. They're going to have all 53 guys active on game day. That's going to be a good thing. They're going to have more players on the practice squad. That's going to be a good thing. They're not going to have limited to IR players coming back on the regular roster during the regular season. That's going to be out. That's a good thing, which it should always be that way. But, hopefully, I think everybody's hoping that we do play. I mean, I'm hoping we play because if the league or the games are not played, I don't work. So selfishly, I would love to see them play. I'm hoping they figure out how to make it work for not only for the players, but also for the fans. Is it no fans in the stands? Is it 1/3 fans? Stadiums full, or is it only going to be on TV? So I think they still have a lot of questions to be answered.
Yeah, and then so speaking of your time after Baltimore, it's been a couple of seasons in Oakland, and then so at what point did you kind of know you were kind of ready to retire?
After that last year, going into I hurt my knee. Going into my last year, I played I think 9 or 7 games my last year. Then I told them to put me on IR once we got out of the playoff race. Knowing that I didn't want to go through rehab again, knowing I didn't want to have any more surgeries on my knees, I just knew it was time to retire. The great thing for me, I played for 4 iconic franchises, 4 iconic owners. They all have their own take. They all do things differently, but they've all been successful. And so I got to see that it doesn't necessarily have to be done in one direction. It can be done in different ways, and you still can win Super Bowls out.
Definitely. And then what was it like getting that call from Canton?
That was a little different because I was working for the NFL Network. The Super Bowl was in Tampa. Matter of fact, I was walking across a bridge to go to work. So they didn't call me. They told me as I got over to my work site that I got into the hall. So they didn't do that knock. You know how David Baker does the knock and all that stuff today? They didn't do that back then. Back in, we had cell phones and all that stuff, but they weren't great cell phones. So I got to figure out like, hey, I'm in the Hall of Fame. Once I got to the NFL Network website at Super Bowl.
That's awesome. Is David Baker the biggest human being you've ever seen before?
He looks like I think he looks like Shrek. That's how big he is. I mean, he doesn't physically look like Shrek.
I know.
But he's that big.
Yeah, no, he's incredible. And I'm like, they said he was too big to play football. I'm like, I don't know. And that's incredible.
He's
and then,
a big man.
And then speaking of John NFL University, how did you get into broadcasting?
At the executive director for the NFL Network called me, and I didn't at that time. The NFL Network wasn't. I think they only did one playoff run the year before, and they're like, "Listen, the following year we're going to have a whole season, and we want you to come out here and do a test run." And I came out in I don't know May or April, something like that, and did a little test run, and they're like, "You want the job?" I'm like,
awesome.
Right now? I'm like, sure, why not? So I did that for 10 years. I had a good time doing it.
That's awesome. I got another question for you. Who's the best defensive back in the NFL today?
That's a hard statement. I think there's a lot of really good players. Richard Sherman, I think, has proven his worth. I think Micah Fitzpatrick, I think he is an extremely exciting safety to watch. I think Jalen Ramsey is the most talented corner in the league. I'm not saying he's the best corner.
Yeah.
I think he's the most talented corner
Yeah.
in the league. And I mean, you look at different guys. I didn't know Humphrey's going to be that good.
Yeah.
For the Baltimore Ravens, I thought he was going to be a marginal player, but the guy can really play football. Yeah. So I think there's some really good players. I don't think one player stands above everybody else right now. I think there's a bunch of really good players. Patrick Peterson, obviously he's had a long career of playing extremely good football over there in Arizona. There's quite a few guys that across the board that have been there for quite a long time. We got some young guys that are coming up, White for the Buffalo Bills, the corner over there. He's an extremely talented player himself. So they got some young players and a good blend of players in the secondary across the board right now in the league.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I can't wait for football season to come back. And then let's go one last question for you. So when everything sort of starts resuming to normal and everything's safe to do, what's the first thing you're looking forward to doing?
Well, I mean, the good thing is I'm a kind of a homebody, so it kind of allowed me to stay at home.
Yeah.
That's what I like doing anyway. And we do like being outdoors as a family. Like tomorrow, we're going to go over to the Colorado River and swim this little cove and kind of put our tent up on the side and stay there for a couple of hours and have a little lunch and whatnot. And then, we have Lake Mead on the other side of the valley, which, we go over there and get on the boats and jet ski. So, we like to be outdoors. We like to, you got to find a way to stay cool in the hot weather in Vegas.
That's awesome. And then for people that don't already follow you on social media, how can they find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at RodWoodson26. That's the best place. I go to Twitter for the most part. I don't use it a whole bunch, but I do like going there and tagging things and sharing things at times. It's a good spot to find me.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a blast. I just wanted to thank you again so much for taking time to chat. This has been incredible.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Appreciate it. Thanks again. Be well, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, you too. Take care now.